Welcome to Sophie & Co. I am Sophie Shevardnadze. Today we're in my native Tbilisi, capital of Georgia. Though small in size, this beautiful country has seen some major changes in the last decade, and Tbilisi has been at its very heart. The recent power swap has raised many hopes for a breakthrough, but also fears of unknown. Today we talk to the new government's frontliner, the new Prime Minister ირაკლი ღარიბაშვილი.
After 2 terms in office, Mikhail Saakashvili has just been replaced in the presidential seat, just like his party was replaced in parliament a year earlier. But after such a powerful ruler, who turned Georgia's economic and political fortunes, will the new arrivals be able to prove themselves? Will they be able to live up to the claim reflected in their party's name? Will they fulfill the Georgian dream?
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much for being with us today. It's great to have you on our show. Only 2 years ago, you were making your first steps in politics. Meanwhile, Georgia is transformed from a presidential republic into a constitutional republic. And all of a sudden, you find yourself holding practically absolute power. Were you expecting something this huge?
Frankly, I never expected it to happen. However, life is a strange thing and it's full of surprises. To me, office or position does not imply luxury, neither is it a matter of honor or fame. One's position implies responsibility more than anything else. It is the duty I have assumed before my country and my people. And it is the responsibility I have before Mr. Ivanishvili, who has put his trust in me and entrusted me with the fate of our country. I'm extremely motivated. I'm motivated to do a quality job in every way, no matter what I do. And most importantly, I'm motivated to be honest to my people and my country. We should live in a way that we are never ashamed to look back. This is my guiding principle. This is the principle that has guided me throughout my whole life.
Nobody doubts your sense of responsibility. But do you have enough experience to govern the country? You're 31, the youngest prime minister in the world as of today. Your Minister of Interior Affairs is 28, and in general, your cabinet of ministers is very young. And since you brought up Mr. Ivanishvili, who is the richest man in Georgia, and also your mentor, critics say that he will be governing the country behind the scenes, not you.
I understand. This skepticism has always been there. It was there when I was appointed Minister of Interior. I was 30 at the time. The ministry was in a lamentable shape when I took over. The system was totally politicized. And I'm proud to point out that we put the ministry back on its feet. And trust in the police has doubled in the past year. The level of trust in the police is 86 to 87%. While it used to be way down before. Mr. Ivanishvili always gave me, and I served as Minister of Interior for a year, gave me enough freedom. I was always free to make my own decisions. As for the skeptics who believe he will be running the show behind the scenes, I will never feel embarrassed to say what I'm about to say. I have said it before, and I will say again that Mr. Ivanishvili is my role model, and I will always follow his example. I will always accept advice from him, especially since I know that this man gives only useful and beneficial recommendations to his people. And if we have to listen to foreign or local experts, critics from the opposition, why can't we listen to someone who made a difference of this magnitude in our country? He freed our country and society from a monstrous regime, that is the national movement regime. It just does not make any sense to me. And if we claim to be pragmatic and efficient, then why not listen? This is my answer, and I'm being totally honest with you.
Since you've mentioned the opposition, well, there are many things that happened for the first time in Georgia in the past 18 months. The first democratic election in the history of modern Georgia, peaceful transfer of power, and it is for the first time that an actual opposition is present in the parliament. Having a real opposition force in the parliament, an opposition that dislikes you so much and will oppose you in many ways. Is it a good thing or a bad thing for the country?
If we look at this issue in terms of politics, we can call them an opposition force, of course, but I would say that they're very hard to understand in general. They are more of an opposition to themselves. They are opposing their own people, their own citizens, and their own country. In other words, they're not doing anything new in reality.
So you do not view them as healthy competition?
It's very difficult to maintain healthy competition with them. There is no such thing as healthy criticism from them. I'm not sure they understand what the word healthy means in the first place. Neither do they know what the word objective stands for. I want to remind everyone, and I know that quite large audiences are listening to us now, I would like to remind everyone that these people have been offering their citizens a deception-driven type of democracy. It was just a facade democracy. It was all facade. I have looked into every field. Name one field where they have not implemented facade changes, facade reforms. These people have prosecuted 3,000 people. To me, it's disastrous. 300,000 of their fellow citizens in 9 years. It was a very ambiguous regime, if you are interested in my take on the issue. I can't accept all this quietly and without emotions. Moreover, I can't accept calmly criticism from them, their sabotage and moral lecturing. This is cynicism at its worst. This is my take on today's opposition. Of course, by the opposition, I mean the national movement, that is, the parliamentary minority.
In the past 10 years, Georgia has been positioned abroad as a country that has undergone substantial changes. Even President Saakashvili's fiercest critics admit that certain modernization processes have been successfully implemented in Georgia. Now, not only members of your opposition, but also foreign investors say that Georgia is backsliding, that its economy is worsening, and that investors are no longer eager to enter Georgia. Some even fear that the country is on its way back to the 1990s.
I totally disagree about economic downslide. Let me remind you that economic downslide, if we can refer to it as downslide, started as early as 2012, that is under the previous government. A vast amount of external debt has been accumulated during their period in power. Even this year, we had to cover significant amounts as part of the country's external debt. The same is true of next year. We will have to pay about 800 million. And who assumed this external debt? We are forced to cover the debt assumed by the previous government. This is one example out of many. And when our party won the election, but President Saakashvili was still in power, he openly stated, both at home and abroad, that a horrible government had come into power and that this new monstrous government, this destructive force, would bury the country. This is what Mikhail Saakashvili said. And they kept doing it all year. In light of all this, it is very difficult to convince the investor that you can guarantee stability. And it is a well-known fact that investors are the best scouts in the world. They're very sensitive to stability. They can measure stability with unique precision. They know exactly when it is advisable to invest in one or another country. This is what happened in reality. Nothing else. Nothing special, at least. Our economy has been through much tougher periods under the previous government, and yet no one talked about it.
During this cohabitation period, many of Saakashvili's colleagues, members of his cabinet, were apprehended and interrogated. At this point, President Saakashvili himself is out of the country. When and if he returns, will he be questioned too?
I can't say with all assuredness. As for the arrests, when investigation agencies have actual substantial evidence proving that someone, even if he or she is a senior official, such as a former Minister of Interior and former Prime Minister Irාკლი, whom we arrested, as well as some former ministers and former high-ranking officials, I have said this on many occasions, and I would like to reiterate that no office or position guarantees immunity. Let's take my position for one, which is very high. If I commit a crime and 5 or 10 years from now a new government comes into power and this new government finds out and proves that I have committed a crime, I should be held liable. We don't enjoy immunity. As for your question whether or not interrogating agencies will have questions to President Saakashvili, if there are any questions raised during the process of investigation, of course, Mikhail Saakashvili, the former president, will be questioned. And I repeat, there is nothing special about it.
President Saakashvili had a very concrete foreign policy agenda. He wanted accession to NATO and the European Union. He constantly quarreled with Russia, which ultimately led to a war. How does your foreign policy differ from that of your predecessor?
As for the main priorities of our foreign policy, they remain the same. We made it clear, and I would like to reiterate, that European integration and NATO are the main directions of our foreign policy. These aspirations of ours are supported and nourished by the will of our people, who want to see Georgia become a full-fledged member of the European Union and NATO. You probably know that over 70% of our citizens support Georgia's accession to the European Union and NATO. The European Union is not some kind of political whim. Let me explain why necessarily the European Union. If we look at the history of Georgia, we'll see that our ancestors and our country have always longed for and had aspirations in relation to Europe and European civilization. This is not something we have devised. Thus, we continue what our ancestors started. We are truly attracted by European values. As for other political aspects, the European Union implies a number of advantages. It will open its market and make it available for Georgian production. And I believe it should make one proud to see products labeled "Made in Georgia" in the European market. This implies gaining a foothold in a different market. As for political aspects, we're talking about safety, security, mobility to and from the European Union zone. All this will have an impact on the welfare of our citizens.
We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we will talk to Georgia's new Prime Minister, ირაკლი ღარიბაშვილი, about Georgia's accession to NATO and is Georgia going to Sochi Olympics in 2014? Stay with us.